Hello and welcome to another video in the Alpha Educational Series with Elliot Omenson and
Nathaniel Vossman.
Today we're going to be talking about how much money you actually need to retire.
It's the magical question.
Magic question. So now if you're willing to go get a tent and live in a national park, it's a very low number.
I would say so. Yeah, it's definitely a number that can vary a lot.
Yeah, but if you want to live on Jupiter Island and risk getting hit by Tiger Woods, it's a very high number.
Yep. Yeah. Be a good way to go out, though.
So those are our two benchmarks.
Yeah, fair enough.
And we're going to talk about all the rest of us that are somewhere in the middle.
Yeah. Well, let's go ahead and just kick it off. Let's see if you got a magic number in head. But so how much money does someone actually need to retire? And why do most people get it wrong? You know, they get to retirement age and maybe they don't have as much saved as they thought.
Well, that's a huge question.
Yeah, we're starting off high level.
Yeah. So first off, obviously, there is no one number for everybody. It's all completely dependent on how much money you spend every month. Yep. And then I would tell you something else that people I don't think seem to recognize, and that is one of the benefits to going to work every day is it's less time to spend money.
Definitely.
Boredom is solved by spending money.
Spending money, eating food.
Right?
So those two things right there.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so you really have to start with what your spending is, right? And then you got to stack on top. You got to try and go through the mental exercise of what you think your spending is going to be as well, I think. And this is, I'll tell you, the number one thing that I see is buying homes. People get bored. They want to do a lot to their house. They want to go buy another house. That's been the number one thing I've seen that's like made retirement difficult.
Yeah.
Or there's this fantasy. So I have a friend of mine. I'm not going to name names or anything, but him and his wife built this home, and it was designed so that all the kids with all their spouses and all their kids could all come and stay at this house when they come visit. So it was like 6 levels.
Yeah, it's pretty big house.
Yeah, it was incredible. And he made a joke to me. He could have literally bought a cul-de-sac and built an individual home for everybody in his family for the price that spent, right? And I see this happen all the time where it's like we have this fantasy of what life's going to be like when we're retired with our kids and our grandkids. And rarely does that actually come to fruition. Rarely is it really needed. And this happens to us in a lot of different ways in life. And so you just got to look at what your actual income, what your income needs are, what big purchases you think you're going to want to have. Planning software, one of the great things about it, it allows you to do goal-based planning. So if you do want to do something like that, it's best to model it and see what the impact to your retirement is going to be before you go doing it.
Definitely. Yeah, definitely. Especially when you can play different scenarios, based off like how you're actually invested. So more aggressive, less aggressive. Also, you can probably throw in like different market conditions. Because you got to be prepared for good and bad.
Absolutely. And I just watch expense creep, where over time the expenses just grow and grow and grow. And it's like, this isn't sustainable.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, I don't know. I don't know if I answered your question.
No, I think you did. I think you did a good job. Like one thing that we've discussed in prior episodes is kind of like thinking about the idea of moving away from pensions into 401ks.
Yes.
And so, back when everyone's having a pension, they're looking at that as an income stream.
Well, yeah, let's go even further back, right? But even before pensions came, there was no such thing as retirement.
Yeah.
Like retirement's a modern concept, right? Not to go biblical, but a sweat of your brow, you're going to eat, right? And I didn't quote that very well because I'm not a Bible scholar.
Close enough.
But if you think about when people lived on a farm, in fact, the guys that I know that live the longest, they're all farmers. Like, it's amazing how many farmers I know. They're like going into 90 because they're up at like 3 or 4 a.m. every day. They're working, right? There's no retirement when you have a farm.
Yeah.
right? When you had a little mom and pop bread shop, cheese shop, shoe shop, or whatever, there's no retirement. My dry cleaner, I love to death and have never once spoken more than 2 words to them because they're Korean and there's a language barrier.
Yeah.
I don't even know how old they are. There's no retirement. I mean, like, I don't know what their retirement is, but they're already past the point to where in America we have this idea of retirement. So before you ever had a pension, you didn't retire. You worked and provided for yourself. Maybe it fell onto your kids at some point, right? Then we industrialized, and with industrialization came these pensions. And pensions are defined benefit plans. It's a benefit provided by your company. And then in 78, with the advent of the 401k, we shifted from defined benefit plans to defined contribution plans, where now the responsibility is on you to contribute. And but along with that shift came a shift in our thinking. We went from thinking about a retirement package being provided to us in terms of income, half our paycheck, 75% of our paycheck, $3,500 a month, $7,000 a month, whatever it was, to this lump sum bucket of money. This is how the 4% rule came into existence, is because by 93, 94, there was enough baby boomers who had been working from 2025 and on. And this question started to get asked: what does this lump sum bucket of money actually equate in terms of income? And then along with that, life expectancy has been climbing. It plateaued and dropped a little bit, I think. But it's still significantly higher than it was.
Yeah, we're probably going to continue to increase as, advancements in medical and technology increases.
Absolutely, right? The system wants you to live as long as possible, even if that quality of life is absolutely miserable. Because the longer you live, the more Social Security payments are made, the more assisted living payments are made, the more medical payments are made, right? There's a whole system that's, the longer you live and the more of your money goes to those things, the wealthier people get, right?
Yeah.
And so now this income stream that you've got to recreate with your life savings has to last you 2 times as long or more.
Yeah, it gets tricky. And then also, without the proper planning, it's like hard to quantify how much is appropriate to withdraw.
Yeah. And so we're actually going to talk about, we're going to have a whole thing on bonds and why I don't believe in bonds. And you don't either.
Yeah.
And when you see what the actual real returns net of taxes on bonds are, you're going to be like, why in the world would I ever have these in my portfolio? And if you're going to tell me that they're there to protect your stock portfolio, then I would tell you to go look at 2022, because they didn't.
Yeah, definitely did not.
And I don't believe most people are going into retirement with enough money to put 10, 20, 30, 40% of their portfolio into something that is actually losing them money every year. Every year, it's losing you money. And we're going to have a whole video on that.
Yeah, I think that will be a good one.
Yeah,
sure.
And so there's always, one of the things that I talk about is that at the top level of risk, there's 2 types of risk. There's the risk from taking action, and there's risk of taking inaction. And to me, bonds are inaction. And there's a huge risk that comes with inaction. And so I actually think one of the hardest things to wrap your head around in retirement is that protectionist ideologies are very harmful. That's my personal belief after 12 years of watching people in retirement.
Yeah, because I think that just hits on the emotional side of things. I think bonds are most used by people who are emotionally tied to security.
Yeah.
And they've been taught that it's security, and to some extent, the value of those bonds is less volatile. But like you said, we were looking at the average real returns on those bonds.
They're all negative.
And it's pretty pathetic. And then you're paying tax on that income.
Yeah. Yes.
So it's like it's even worse.
And then it's even more negative.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I think that would be a good episode.
Yeah.
So outside of these retirement accounts, like what are other sources of income for people in retirement?
Well, obviously the first one is Social Security.
Yeah, that's a big one.
Okay. And we're going to get into how valuable Social Security is in a second, I think. And it is and it isn't. There's a case to be made that if that money was put into somewhere other than the old age survivors disability trust, it would have been a lot better off for you. But still, we're going to talk about the value of Social Security because there is a huge value there.
Yeah.
Then obviously you have your retirement accounts like your IRAs, 401ks, 403bs, 457s, and things like that, where all the income has never been taxed. It's all tax deferred, and it's all subject to required minimum distributions and fully taxable as income. Then you have your non-qualified brokerage accounts, individual accounts, or your account might be labeled as a trust, like might be titled in your living trust. Those all generate short-term and long-term capital gains taxes because it's after-tax money that's invested. Then you have your Roth, where it's also after-tax money, but it's never taxed again. That's the most valuable account you could ever have. Some people take their IRA and convert it into a source of income, guaranteed income via a annuity. Some people use permanent life insurance to do something like a Roth conversion, where it gives you access to tax-free money, but then there's some leverage factors that come into play there. And then for more adventurous people, you might have rental properties.
Yeah.
Also kicking off income. And so one of the things that we talk about, especially in my book coming out, Keep What You've Earned, we talk about how the more, that we used to use this analogy of a stool. If your stool is one leg, that's a very awkward stool to sit on.
Yeah, I'd say so.
You better be a Ukrainian gymnast. Okay. Even with two legs, that's an awkward stool to sit on. Once you get to three, it's starting to create some stability. The more legs your stool has, the more stable it is.
So kind of going back on that Social Security, like how big of a role does that play when we're doing retirement planning, considering that's like our for sure foundation?
You just said it, right? So Social Security is the only, and I hate to use this word, it's the only investment you have, forced investment, by the way.
Yeah, forced, yeah.
That is guaranteed by the federal government. It has a built-in cost of living adjustment with it, and it's guaranteed for life. There is no other source of income for you that carries those three things.
Yeah.
And one of the questions I used to before 2015, when Social Security got stripped of its two most effective methods of filing, I think it was September, October of 2015 when that happened, which stripped about $250,000 out of everybody, our clientele's lifetime benefit. I used to ask this question: how many people think the federal government's going to give you $1 million to retire off of? And no one would ever raise their hand. And then I would ask, well, how many of you stand to receive $40,000 or more every year in Social Security benefits? Right? Well, following the 4% rule, which I disagree with, but it's the standard, I would need $1 million invested in the market to get $40,000 a year off of it. And that $40,000 still wouldn't be guaranteed for life.
Yeah, definitely.
Right? So you could make a case that a $40,000 Social Security stream is worth more than $1 million in the stock market.
Yeah, because like we said, the 4% rule has a pretty high probability of failing. So
yeah, and this has no probability of failing. I don't care what the media tells you. I don't care what the federal debt gets to. Social Security will not fail in any of our clients' lifetimes.
Yeah, and
I'm willing to go all the way down to our teenage kids of clients' lifetimes. It'll change, and it changes. They've changed it multiple times. The biggest change was 83. The next biggest change was 2015. And I actually have to hat tip. It was a Democrat Congress, a Democrat Senate, and Barack Obama who actually had the guts to strip those two methodologies out of Social Security and reduce everyone's Social Security payment. It has to happen. Nobody's got the guts to do it. And they were the only ones willing to strip away $250,000 of your income out of your Social Security. So, mazel tov.
Yeah. Yeah, it's good when things that really need to be done get done.
Yeah. No, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So I think that's an important thing. Definitely not going away anytime soon. Just might change as things go on. So, teenagers of our clients right now probably going to see much different Social
Yeah,
Security.
it'll have to be different.
Yeah, there's just no way.
Yeah.
And so going back to the amount of income in retirement, like when you're sitting down with a client who's looking to retire next 3, 4, 5 years, what's the best way to kind of project the amount of income they're going to need in retirement versus the income they're making in their later years of working?
Well, okay, so this is where garbage in, garbage out, right? So when we're building out a client spending plan, the more accurate and detailed that information can be, the more realistic the whole plan is, right? And so, a lot of times people have this fantasy that we're going to pay our house off going into retirement. We're not going to have a house payment. Is that true?
You're not going to have a house repayment?
Yeah.
Well, it depends on whether or not you're buying a new house, but yeah.
No. It's never true. I don't care whether you buy a new house or not. You're never going to not have a house payment.
Yeah. I see what
Why
you
is
mean.
that?
Because of all the costs associated with it, even if you're not paying, mortgage and interest.
Let's just say you built your entire house out of titanium and you have no upkeep. Would you not have a house payment?
You still would.
Yeah, exactly. Because you're still paying what? Taxes and insurance.
Yep.
Well, with a titanium house, you might not have to pay insurance.
Yeah, fair enough. But definitely still taxes.
But for your entire life, you will be paying insurance and taxes on your home.
Yeah.
If you're not paying insurance and taxes on your home, you are paying a rent payment, and that might be to an apartment or a house, or it might be to a long-term care facility, or it might be to a retirement home. That payment's never going away, and yet people think it's gonna, right? Your car, you might finish your car payments, but you're going to replace that car payment with some kind of maintenance cost, right?
Yep.
Unless you buy a Honda or a Toyota, and I don't think you ever have to pay for maintenance on those.
Fair enough.
They're like bricks. And so I think like when we're doing this, right, we also assign different inflation rates to different things, right? Medical expenses, that does not inflate at the normal inflation rates. It's at least 2 times.
Yeah.
Right? Anything the government subsidizes inflates at a much higher rate than anything else. So college expenses, medical expenses, all skyrocket because you have this entity that just prints more money to pay for it. And so when we're building this out, right, like we need to make sure we know, when does your house payment end? And we want to put a change in, and then we don't put inflation on a home because usually that's locked in for 15, 20, 25, 30 years. But then we have to have a change happen when it's paid off where your P&I goes away, but your insurance and taxes still continue. I don't know about the rest of y'all, but my property taxes went up 11% last year. Well, the system's default's 3.23. I can't have 3.23 in on my property taxes when they're jacking them up by 11%.
Oh.
Right? And so then you have things like your healthcare expenses. If you retire early, what are you going to do for healthcare between that and when Medicaid kicks in?
That's pretty expensive.
Yeah, and so it's just the more, and this is I always tell people it's the absolute worst part of coming on board with us is digging in and getting that granular with what your expenses are.
Yeah, because I think some of it too is hard to predict because, like you mentioned, you stop working and you just start spending more money, and then obviously people have a lot of plans to try to travel the world, at least in their early retirement years.
Yep.
Go see their children, grandchildren, potentially across the country, across the world, and it's a lot to factor in.
Yeah, and so I don't think this is necessarily in your question, but one of the things that I like to do is I like to envision my expenses fall into 2 different categories. I'm just trying to see if this is going to come up later. The first category is like what I need every month to be comfortable. Don't want to have to clip coupons. Don't want to have to donate blood, right? And then my second category is everything I'd like to do, but I don't have to do at any particular point in time.
Yeah.
So vacations, decks, new cars, roofs. And you might have to put a roof. I mean, if you have to put a roof on a particular point in time, it's probably due to damaging and a found insurance claim. But a lot of those kind of expenditures, what's really cool about that is that I like to use your market account, your growth account, and we just like to manage that. So if we set up the bare minimum payments to cover your monthly nut, and then you let us know, hey, 3 months from now, I'd like to go to Ireland or something. I need 25 grand. Well, we can monitor your account in the market, and when it pops up, we just peel off 5-10 grand, whatever amount of time is we have and how much money it popped up, we just peel off at high points and pool that cash to get that cash over to you by the time that you're ready to need it. And I have a client I was actually just chatting with this morning. I have done this for them for a decade. And they started off with a very small amount of money. And we've enabled them by doing that to literally, they put a pool in their backyard just for the dog. Actually, dogs. It's like 5 dogs.
Lucky dogs.
Yeah, it's like only a foot, 2 feet deep.
Yeah.
This pool's thousands of dollars, right?
Yeah.
If you had looked at the amount of money they had when they started, you would have been like, there's no way in the world that makes sense to do. And yet they're able to do it, and they have no worries, and it's not a stress to them because we just snagged the top.
Well, that's good when they're able to communicate and we're able to plan that for them.
Correct.
So we're able to pull that money out at good times instead of just saying one day they want to spend 20 grand on a pool.
And the market's, we for some reason kicked off a war in Iran. The market's gone into the tank, and now you need 20 grand, and we're sitting there going, this is not a good time.
Yeah.
Well, and so that's one of the other things, not to plug Alphi Vault right now, but that's one of the other benefits of Alphi Vault is to be able to have cash somewhere that's earning 8%. And now we don't have to get forced into a situation of selling down a position in order to raise the cash for you. You just take it out of Alphi Vault, and when, the market's sorted out its wonky behavior due to whatever reason, which there's always one, then we can replenish your Alphi Vault account.
Yeah, because I think it's kind of the beauty of diversification outside of just allocation. It's like you got something like the Alphi Vault that's earning, pretty reasonable rate each year. And the markets are down at all. There's no need to pull from the market. You just pull from that account. And when markets pop back up, maybe you refund or, refill whatever you took out if you want to.
Yeah.
But that's a good way to provide downside risk because you never really have to pull from the market.
No, you're never forced into it if you have enough money sitting over there, and that money's not like bonds losing you money every year due to inflation and whatever. Yeah. You're actually, because there's also no fees on that 8%.
Yeah, it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
So kind of going a little bit back into inflation, I think everyone's got a pretty good grasp on inflation. They see, the CPI reports that come out, each month. But in retirement, like you're talking about, things that are funded by the federal government, they inflate at quite higher rate. So in this case, when you're in retirement, it's really the healthcare that really, really stacks up. So what kind of drag does that typically have on a client's portfolio?
Well, I'm going to go in the exact opposite direction of what you're expecting.
All right.
And I'm going to say something probably very controversial.
All right, let's hear it.
If you're retired and you have money in the stock market, you should absolutely love inflation.
That's a bold claim.
That's a bold claim. All right. Now, why would I say this? What's the cause of inflation?
Well, I mean, just excess money supply.
Excess money supply. It's the government printing money.
Yeah.
It's literally a clock. Within 2 years of the government increasing money supply, inflation hits.
Yeah, more dollars chasing after the same amount of goods.
Exactly. And so this is one of the things I find funny when they argue about stocks being overvalued based on, price to expense ratios, P&E ratios, isn't that what that is?
Yeah, PE ratio, yep.
It's like, but are you taking into account the increased money supply, right?
Yeah.
And I don't ever hear anybody discussing that aspect of it. Okay. If you look at the stock market, right, and you look at the price of NVIDIA, right, we have a client that, or a prospective client that bought in at $3 or $5 a share. If that was milk and you used to buy a gallon of milk for $3 and now you buy a gallon of milk, what's NVIDIA at?
Probably around 180 or so.
Now you're paying $180 a gallon of milk. That's called inflation.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's not called inflation when it comes to the stock market for some reason.
Yeah, it's just called growth in that case.
It's called growth, but it's what?
Yeah,
It's inflation.
Yeah, it's the price.
You've inflated the value of the company, right? So when I'm retired and I'm no longer working, I have assets in the market. So I have a theory that's completely unfounded because it comes out of my own head, that the stock market acts as a long-term stopgap on inflation. When the government prints and dumps a ton of money into the system, right? If the system is healthy, I don't need to sit on that cash. I want to put that cash somewhere where it's going to work for me.
Yeah.
And I move it out of the system and into the stock market, inflating the value of those stocks.
Yeah. Yeah.
When the system's unhealthy due to war, COVIDs, whatever, fear, I take money out of the stock market and into the system, and it drives up the inflation of the goods that I'm able to buy. And so you have this seesaw where money's either flowing into the stock market, inflating that, or money's flowing out or not going into it, where it's flowing from the government into the system and not going into the stopgap, and it's inflating the price of goods.
Yeah.
Now, I'm sure somebody smarter than me can tell me how wrong I am.
I think it makes sense, and I think, like you said, if the economy is relatively solid, that people would ultimately take that extra money in the system and put it into stocks, and that's literally what causes stock prices to go up. Because like NVIDIA or Meta or whoever, they could really post any kind of quarterly results, and generally, the stock price matches that. But in reality, at the end of the day, what's driving the stock price is just the amount of money going into the market.
No, I mean, seriously, think about it, right? Every week, what happens in America? Payroll.
Yeah.
And every week, what happens connected to payroll? 401k contributions, corporate matches. It is an automatic money into the market.
Yeah.
Every week.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah, and that's what drives them up.
So, yes, your healthcare is your second biggest expense in retirement, second to taxation.
Yep.
Most everybody else tries to claim it's the number one because they don't, for some reason, consider taxes to be an expense. But number one is taxes. Number two is healthcare. And yeah, that sucks. But with money in the market, I'd have to run the numbers. I'm willing to bet you the inflation of the market outpaces the inflation of what portion of your expenses is healthcare. So let me put that caveat on it.
Yeah, I would probably agree with that.
So as a financial advisor who makes my money based off the value of the stock market, I'm going to love the government printing money.
Yeah, because I mean,
it's horrible. It's horrible for the long-term benefit of the nation.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, if the stocks can outpace the inflation by a good margin, then you come out on top.
Yeah, but as long as the government just keeps printing trillions of dollars, it's flowing to the stock market eventually.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, just the same way as goods inflate.
Yeah.
More money.
And even when those goods inflate and that money goes to whoever's selling you the good, what do you think they do with their extra money? Put it in the stock market.
Yeah.
It all goes to the stock market eventually.
Yeah, that is true. That is true. So you mentioned, healthcare is second biggest expense.
Yeah.
And so tax being
Number one.
The biggest.
Yes.
So how big of an impact do taxes have on the amount of money you're going to be able to spend in retirement?
Well, I think there's an even bigger impact first. And I see taxes as restricting how people spend their money in retirement. Okay? So yesterday I had a phone call with a client. They had moved a decent chunk of money out of a non-qualified account over to Alpha Vault. Well, when they did that, they had to sell those positions inside a non-qualified account. your tax event occurs when you sell something, not when it leaves the account.
Yep.
With an IRA, the tax event occurs when it leaves the account, not when you sell something.
Yep.
And so I get this message from Abby, hey, so-and-so called, they got hit this huge tax bill. Now everything's like, well, what's huge?
Yeah, it's a pretty relative term.
Right. And does that huge tax bill outweigh the benefit of what we did, or does what we do outweigh the benefit of that tax bill? And considering that anytime you're going to get that money out of there anyways, you're going to be taxed on it.
Yeah. So
my point of that is that here's something that has this huge benefit for you to do, but out of I think the tax bill is $2,600. A $2,600 expense unnecessarily in retirement might seem like a big deal. And you're like, why? I didn't want to pay $2,600. But what you did provides benefits beyond $2,600, especially when you take into account that you can't get that money regardless.
Yeah, you're going to pay $2,600 anyways, or probably more, as it grows. So
exactly.
You're going to pay that tax regardless whenever you want to sell it.
And so I really see people allowing taxes to constrict how they access their funds and what they do with it. And I think that sucks.
Yeah.
But because the second part of this is your question.
Just like how it affects, obviously, you pay more tax, you're going to have less money to spend. Like, so how big of a drag does that really have on their retirement spending?
So so there's tax brackets, and then there's your net effective tax rate.
Yeah.
So the tax bracket, you might be in the 22% tax bracket, but when you look at your total amount of tax paid divided by your gross income, it's a very different number.
Yeah, much different.
Yeah, and so for most retirees that I see who are their combined total income, or AGI, or whatever you want to call it, for the years in the $100,000 to $120,000, $150,000 range, there's somewhere in the 9 to 11% net effective tax rate. You might not think that's a big deal, right? But if your financial advisor told you they're taking 10% a year off managing your assets,
then you got a problem.
You'd be like, oh, no, you are not.
Yeah.
Right? The only places I know where that willingly get 10% of your income are churches.
Yeah.
And the federal government and your financial advisor ain't not a church.
Yeah.
Okay. And what's worse is that one is either one of those other scenarios, it's a willing situation where you're of your own free will and choice choosing to pay or donate that money, right? With the government, nobody chose it, right?
No.
Half the country chose it for you, right? And now you're stuck dealing with it. And we've talked about this in a lot of other things, you don't have to. And so I just think if you looked at what's the cost of a 10% drag, 9%, 10%, 11% drag on your 20, 30 years.
It's a lot
of income.
Yeah, because you imagine that on the flip, and say you could add 9 or 10% to your growth on your accounts.
Yeah,
make a monumental difference.
Monumental.
And I think this is exactly where, like, having, I mean, maybe not necessarily doing a Roth conversion, but having Roth money can make a massive difference. Because they're saying the net effective tax rate is quite a bit lower than their marginal tax bracket. But if you have a Roth, all that money is coming off that top bracket. And so it's making like a very big impact.
Huge impact. I mean, imagine if you could use your Roth money just to keep you out of the 22 and in the 12.
Exactly. That's a big difference.
Oh, yeah. I'm willing to bet you just dropped your net effective tax rate down to 7.
Yeah.
Because also keep in mind here when we're talking about this, if you're trying to do that math in your head, portion of your income is Social Security. And by taking the portion of your income that would break you from 12 to 22, you also reduce the amount of taxation on your Social Security.
Yeah. Which saves you a lot of money.
A lot of money.
And realistically, to do so, you really don't even have to pull that much out of a Roth. So if you have a decently healthy Roth balance, you can use that, manipulate your taxes, and it can essentially last your entire retirement.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So let's see. I guess continue on with the tax side of things, proper tax planning, like how big of an impact can that have? Like, do you think more people should be looking into Roth conversions?
Well, here, let me ask you a question.
Okay.
At what age should you start? If you want to do proper tax planning, at what age would you start?
Whenever you get your first job, I'd say.
Yesterday.
Yeah.
Yesterday.
Yeah.
And if you can't go back in time, today.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, why is that, right? Do you have any idea how many people I see? They're max funding a 401k and they're not putting a dime into a Roth. And I see people that are max funding a 401k over and above and beyond their tax deferred portion, and the remainder of it is going into a non-qualified bucket. So you're not getting a tax benefit on putting your money there, and that money could have gone into a Roth.
Yeah. If you start young, just even if you don't do a Roth 401k, a Roth IRA can grow to be massive.
Yeah.
If you start young.
Yeah. And then this is difficult with a 401k because I don't know if people's employers allow this. But I, for the longest time, was completely wrong about something. You do not have to wait till you're 59 and a half to move money from a IRA to a Roth and avoid that 10% penalty. Am I correct on that?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So if your employer had a 401k Roth, there could be a point pre-59 and a half or pre-retirement where it might benefit you to stack some of these strategies together and put money into a 401k and roll a much larger amount over into a Roth every year than what the Roth contribution limit allows.
Yeah. Yeah.
So.
And it's one of those things that's like better to start sooner rather than later. Get that into a tax-free account, your Roth, and just let that compound, let that grow. And then, once you get to retirement, that's when you can start pulling from these different accounts, your non-qualified, some maybe pre-tax, post-tax, and really manipulate things to avoid being those ultra-high tax brackets. Reduce those, your top tax bracket, reduce your Social Security tax, and that's thousands of dollars extra a year that you just get to spend for the same amount of money invested.
Absolutely.
Which makes a big difference because, let's just say you don't change your spending, but you just have the extra money. All of a sudden you get to be, old, you're ready to pass that money on. And all of a sudden you got a lot of money to pass on.
Yeah.
So it benefits you because it gives you certainty of retirement.
Yeah.
And it benefits your kids, their grandkids by being able to pass along a larger sum of money.
Yeah, and especially if it's the Roth money, then it's not falling under the Secure Act and being forced liquidated over 10 years at their highest points of earning and causing them to pay extra taxes on what they inherited from you.
Yep. Yeah. That Roth is a powerful account. It's a good one to pass down.
Yeah. So, and life insurance obviously is the same. It's all tax-free. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah. So what would you say are some of the biggest mistakes people make in retirement?
I think everybody's focused on this dollar amount that they need, right? And they have these goals, $1 million, $2 million, $3 million. That's not the goal. I didn't learn, it's crazy. I didn't learn this until this year. And it was actually, it was first put into a patent application that had nothing to do with this, oddly enough. And it's, I think Robert Kiyosaki talks about it. And, the guy that built the back end of Alpha Vault, Austin Fowler, who's been on our Backseat Baller podcast and is a certifiable genius.
Very smart.
Talks about this as well. What's the true definition of wealth? Well, it's how long you can go. How long can you pay your bills without working? Right?
Yeah.
And so I could only have $100,000 in my name. And if I had no bills and somehow didn't, farmed all my own food or something, I don't know. That $100,000 might last me.
Yeah. And so I think wealthy is definitely a pretty relative term.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember back in the day, I had this lady come in and she was just so down on herself. She hadn't saved a lot of money for retirement. But when we started looking at it, it's kind of funny. 3 different husbands. I think each one was over 10 years. We were able to go through and pick the one that had the highest Social Security income. Then one of the divorces got her half of this guy's pension. And then her job had a pension. By the time I was done looking at her situation, I was like, ma'am, you got $8,000 a month from Social Security, your pension, a husband's pension, coming in every month for the rest of your life until you're dead.
That's pretty good, like certain income.
Yeah, I'm like, you have killed it.
Yeah.
On planning for retirement.
Yeah, I would say so. Just marry a bunch of husbands and take a little bit of each pension.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, and that's kind of probably a sexist joke to me. It's not a joke. It was a real, true life situation, and I just had to put it in perspective for her. And her income was her expenses were significantly below this guaranteed income that she had. And so I told her, and by the way, you don't need a financial advisor. There's nothing for any of us to do. No. You're free to sail off into the sunset and live a great life. And it was just awesome, the transformation from when she walked in to when she walked out.
Well, yeah, she probably walked out feeling like $1 million.
And she should have felt like $1 million. She should have felt like $2 million.
Yeah. Fair enough. All right, so just wrapping things up. Any final notes? Anything that people should be paying attention to if they're looking to retire soon?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, the number one question is just after you account for taxes, is the income you're able to create off your portfolio going to last you forever? And it has to be forever.
Yeah.
People tell me all the time they want to drive the poorest person to the graveyard. Well, that's impossible because I don't know when you're going to die unless you'd like me to accelerate the time frame.
Yeah, if you had a sure end date, then you could probably do that. But without that,
you just can't, right? And so you have to, you really just have to plan forever.
Yeah.
Right. And know that some money's going to get passed on, hopefully. And you got to take into account taxes. You have to take into account your healthcare costs inflating at probably 8%. I believe you need to build those two different buckets of expenses from what's fixed and what's required to what can be managed. And I love getting to build that floor of guaranteed income for people because it's really what sets people free.
Yeah. Yeah. I think uncertainty is nice, covers all like their necessities, and then you use the growth to pay for some of the wants.
Yes, absolutely. So.
All right. I think that covers it.
Yeah, that was good.
Yep.
Thanks, Nathaniel.
Of course.
All right, everybody. Till the next one. Take care. Hit us up with any questions.